world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday the 13th of April, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we had peace talks, supposedly, over the weekend, but the results were baked in. They've decided to cease the peace. Actually, Israel never wanted to abide by a ceasefire in the first place. And so we see the global economy being crippled. And folks, as we've said before, all of the stuff that was wrong, nothing is being changed. It's being escalated. They're pouring gasoline on the fire. The harm to the supply chain and the global economy is already baked in for quite some time, but they're going to continue to pour gasoline on the fire. A good example of this is that money printing has now started back up again. So we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to take a look at something that is far more serious. We have Ben Sasse, who in his own personal story, of course, he was a former senator, and he left the Senate, became head of a University of Florida, then given a death sentence of cancer. And I want you to hear what he has to say. We'll be right back. But first, let's begin with general news. We have the Coast Guard confiscating over $33 million of cocaine in a major bust. They then lined the people up and executed them. No, just joking. This was not, Hegseth was not in charge of this operation. We don't normally do that, do we? But Hegseth and the people in the Pentagon are boasting about the fact that they preemptively kill people even if they aren't certain that they've got drugs on their boat. And as Rand Paul has pointed out, when the Coast Guard interdicts, 25% of the time, the ships that they think have drugs do not have drugs. But that's what we do now in the U.S. military. Again, the war on drugs has been going on 55 years as of June the 17th this year. So we're just a couple of months away from 55 years of the drug war. The fact that they're getting escalating amounts, $33 million of cocaine in a major bust, that is testimony to the fact that drug war is a failure. The amounts keep getting bigger as the years and the decades go by. And guess what else is getting bigger? The police and surveillance state, which has been justified by saying that this is the right way to stop drugs. It's not. It is a spiritual issue, folks. Eyes on the road. Thousands of U.S. cities are merging cameras with their AI to surveil Americans in their cars. And of course, we've talked about this many times, but we need to be reminded of this on a regular basis. And so has the Free Thought Project talked about this many times. There's another article from The Conversation talking about the flock cameras. And it really hit home because one of the first examples that they gave is a small city, not too far from where we live, Johnson City, Tennessee, a very small city. And they spent $8 million on flock cameras. This is why we can't have nice things. It's not just a military-industrial complex. They're going to war with us, with a police state, and we have to pay for it with our taxes. Even as you've had different communities have organized to push back against this, even when the communities don't want it, and they let their local government know it, they still go ahead with it. We have lost control of our government, our big brother, big surveillance government. Few could have predicted when we looked at cars that used to dictate urban planning. Of course, urban planners have always hated cars. The CEO of Lyft was by training an urban planner. Urban planners love cities. Urban planners hate cars. As a matter of fact, I remember covering his op-ed piece. He said, the greatest thing mankind has ever invented is cities. It's like, well, you're the only person who thinks that. You and your other urban planners, everybody else is doing everything they can to escape the cities. That's why they got to the suburbs and improved our lives when we got to the suburbs. But they hate that. They call that urban sprawl. And they have done everything they can to make it difficult for people to have cars. And now they are accelerating that, of course. Part of this is eyes on the road. And we can tell how they're going to use this surveillance as well to stop cars. Local governments signing contracts with private companies that provide the hardware and the service. The companies entice authorities with free trials of surveillance equipment and promise free access to their data in ways that bypass local oversight laws. Yeah, this is the catnip for politicians and law enforcement. Hey, if you use us, we'll give you all the info. Let us collect the information. And then there's no law against that, right? You can't spy on people without a warrant, but we can, and we can give you all that information if you just do business with us. And that goes back to AT&T right after World War II. They were given a monopoly for long distance carrying. And they were more than happy to turn over all the information to the government without a search warrant. And it was taken to the Supreme Court, and they said, wait, that's our data. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's not your data. That belongs to the corporation. And if they want to willingly hand it over without a search warrant, they can do that. And so we have these corporations that have been deputized into the police state, and the Supreme Court has gone along with this fiction. And that is the basis, basically, for everything that we have in terms of the police state here. It is prohibited for the government to do it, but the government can use the corporation as a beard to spy on you, to surveil you, to censor your free speech in the digital public square. So they said there's few peer-reviewed studies on the effectiveness of these surveillance cameras. Well, of course, it's just like Big Pharma, right? These things are not safe. They're not effective. And we've had multiple cases. Every couple of weeks, I see another high-profile case of somebody whose life was turned upside down because AI misidentified them. I've spoken in depth about several of these. I won't go into them again today. The studies that exist find little evidence that they've led to reductions in violent crime rates, though they seem to be helpful in solving some types of crimes like car theft. Yeah, I'm sure that they can spot the speeders as well, right? And the people who haven't paid up on their insurance or other protection racket money, right? So what they say here, and they've got a tech name for this, techno-solutionism. The idea that complex issues like crime, poverty, and climate change can be solved by technology. Just like the drug war, right? We've always had one tool. That is law enforcement, hit somebody over the head with a truncheon or to throw them in jail or to hit them with a fine. Now they've got a new solution for everything, and that is artificial intelligence. It's going to be the horn of plenty. We won't have to work. They're all going to take care of us. This is a path for dependency, if ever there was one. The U.S. doesn't have a federal law like European Union's General Data Protection Regulation that meaningfully limits the collection, retention, sale, or sharing of location and mobility data. Of course they don't, because the sharing of location and mobility data has been the raison d'etre of the unholy union between the internet, the tech companies, and the intelligence agencies. They jumped in with both feet, even came out with their own venture capital firm. In-Q-Tel was a venture capital firm of the CIA. And if you go back and look at the venture capital firms that poured money into all these startups that now own the internet, it was littered with people who were current and former national security people, NSA, CIA, that type of person. They were on the venture capital boards. They were picking the contestants, making sure that whoever won the competition, and let them compete against each other. We want the strongest ones to win. But we know that whoever wins is going to be serving us. So as a result, in the U.S., since we don't have any law against the corporations being deputized crony surveillance partners, data gathered through surveillance infrastructure in the U.S. can circulate with limited transparency and with no accountability. Civil liberties groups, digital rights organizations have been sounding an alarm on these cameras for over a decade. The promise was very simple. If you got more data, you're going to have less crime. Remember when you had Eric Schmidt say, people are going to be, was it him or was it somebody else that I'm thinking of? Maybe it was Larry Ellison who said, I'm not sure who said it now. It's one of these techno-corrupt billionaires.
They all kind of blend into each other at some point.
But they said, I just thought about it or I would have looked it up, but the quote, but they said, well, you're going to be better behaved, right? When you know that you're being watched all the time. That's a feature, not a bug. No, it is a bug. Without robust legal safeguards, this data can possibly be used to target political opposition. You think? Of course, this has already happened during the current administration's aggressive deportation efforts. Recently, Customs and Border Patrol was given access to over 80,000 flock cameras, which have also been used to surveil the protests and the protesters. But of course, there are other things that they will use it for. We'll get into. And just to remind you again, there's an organization out there that is a grassroots organization that has started to fight these flock cameras. It's called DFlock, and their online platform documents the spread of automated license plate reader networks in order to help communities resist their deployment. The movement frames these systems not merely as traffic technology, but also as linchpins of an expanding government data dragnet, one that demands stronger oversight from the people and the consent of the community. Except that we really know where this is going to go. I mean, you don't have to think too much. It's not just going after political opposition, which of course they will and have already done, but it's also going after the cars themselves.
Proposed in Massachusetts would limit how far you can drive in your own car. So lawmakers say it would help reduce the state's greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah. Now, while no specific mileage limit was listed, the bill would require MassDOT to set goals to reduce the number of statewide driving miles. It would also establish a new council to find ways to make public transportation more accessible for residents. Now, critics say a cap on personal vehicle miles would directly impact those in rural parts of the state.
That's the point. That's the point. They don't want people living outside of the city. They want to make it difficult, if not impossible, for you to live outside the city. You're just not going to be allowed to drive. This goes back to Agenda 21, folks. Then it was updated to the UN Agenda 2030. We got a little bit more detail with the 15-minute cities. They keep getting more detailed and explicit about where they want this to go. But this has been around for a very long time. Agenda 21. And of course, they use the climate MacGuffin to scare people into this. We need to laugh when we hear about this greenhouse gas emission. Gaslight emission is what we're seeing here with this. So it doesn't slap a hard cap on the daily commute yet. But as you heard, it orders Massachusetts Department of Transportation to come up with a goal for how many vehicle miles you should be allowed every year. And they're creating a special commission to do this. And also at the same time, of course, they realize that they're going to have to give you a little bit of pressure relief. You need to be able to move a little bit. So they want you to move only through public transportation. It's always about creating dependency on the government. That's what the welfare state has been about. It's not about helping people. This is not about saving the planet from some non-threat of greenhouse gas emissions. This is about creating dependency. This is about taking over your life. All this stuff, universal basic income, don't worry. You will own nothing and you'll be happier. You won't have to worry about anything. We'll provide everything for you. And just as Solzhenitsyn said in the Stalinist Soviet Union, he said, just understand that if you push back against these people, they're going to take away your job. They'll take away your home because you don't own anything. They'll put you on the street as punishment. That's what they always work for. That is what this is truly about. This is a kind of tyranny, a kind of Marxist tyranny, quite frankly. When we look at it, one person put this up in response to that report. And it said, hey, Grok, what are the 3 signs a country is heading towards communism? Give me a short answer, please. Grok says, number 1, expanding government control over private property and businesses through regulations or nationalization. Nobody in my lifetime has done more to nationalize control of businesses than Donald Trump. And we've had the bailout of Chrysler and some other things that were not constitutional, that were counterproductive, and yet Trump takes over the businesses in order to run them. I mean, it's not just here's a helping hand for which I have no constitutional authority. We've seen that happen with Obama. We've seen that happen with other bailouts in the past of Chrysler. But no, he wants to run the corporation. Number two, erosion of free speech and individual rights with increasing censorship and surveillance. Okay, we've checked both of those boxes. What's the third one? Centralized economic planning that prioritizes state redistribution over market freedoms. Yeah, we're going to decide which industries are going to be favored, which companies are going to be favored. We're not going to allow the market to sort that out. We're going to sort that out, centrally planning it. And we see this over and over again. It's about creating dependency, creating control. That's what this is truly about. They want to push people onto public transit, and it'd be for your own good. Isn't that great? The bill proposed in Massachusetts will limit how far you can drive in your own car. Lawmakers say it would help to reduce the state's greenhouse gas emissions. The committee, by the way, gave it a favorable 4-1 vote. How's democracy working out for you guys there? Huh? Not working at all, is it? This is not a fringe idea, says Zero Hedge. It's part of a broader push to ration mobility under the twin excuses of climate and equity, and to push the 15-minute city concept. They not only want you to get out of the urban and suburban areas, but they want you to be concentrated and locked down even within the cities. This is why I say, when Eric Peters, I talked to him, it really is about mobility and liberty. When you stop and think about it, what are the first couple of goals that a military has when they go to war with somebody? Number one, you want to eliminate their communication or restrict it, right? It'd be great if you could tap into it and listen to everything that they're doing. Well, that's what we're seeing online with the censorship. That's what we're seeing online with the auditing by artificial intelligence and that type of thing, the shadow banning or the outright banning. Number two, you want to restrict their mobility, right? These are the targets of what they're doing right now. It is a plan. It is a war against us by our own government. And it's not just in America. It's in every country, just like it was with the pandemic. The pandemic was the MacGuffin to let them practice this. They'll, whatever excuse they want to come up with, they'll come up with another pandemic or the revived climate change or whatever. They'll always come up with some kind of MacGuffin. But the bottom line is that they want to control, restrict, and surveil you for everything that you do. Need to visit a family across town or haul supplies for a business? Too bad. The goal is fewer cars, fewer miles, more dependence on government. For transit, it's already unreliable. The transit is already crime-ridden in blue states. Again, the lockdown was just the next step of the test that they've been running. They ran the first one of these games, these germ games, 2 months before 9/11. And they practiced it for 20 years. This was the next stage of it. After they've been doing simulations and training. But this is what they want to do, constantly doing lockdown. And again, remember, lockdown was always a prison term. We've forgotten that because we, as well, especially the children, have been conditioned to understand that lockdown is for your safety, right? When something happens in a school, we go to lockdown. It's a jail term. And I said that when they started putting the metal detectors and the police in the schools, having lockdown drills and all the rest of this. I said, it literally is a prison. I referred to it as a prison metaphorically when I was in school because there was no homeschooling option then at that point in time. And I really did feel like I was locked in prison. But it has become that quite literally. And it is a training ground to get people to accept this in their adult life and outside of school. Democrats are importing the same top-down control in America where rural families, tradespeople, and anyone who is not lucky enough to live in a walkable Boston enclave gets punished the hardest. The bill's own text demands the state develop a, quote, reasonable pathway, unquote, to cut vehicle miles traveled, through everything from denser development to parking restrictions and to tech-enabled tracking. So they will use they'll use the flock cameras as well as license plate readers, as well as your phone. Don't forget, your phone is the big brother thing. Remember the NSA thing, and it was not covered really in America. It was so interesting to me because, again, corporate sponsors, Apple is a big corporate sponsor, so they're not going to put something negative up that would reflect on Apple. But there were 3 slides that were published by Der Spiegel in Germany that came out of the Snowden leaks of NSA stuff. And I've shown those 3 slides many times, but I'll just describe it briefly. It said, who would have thought in 1984, and they showed the iconic 1984 Super Bowl commercial that Apple did about the Macintosh versus the IBM PC. Who would have thought in 1984, and they had a picture of that this would become Big Brother? And they show Steve Jobs holding up the iPhone. And then it shows people lined up outside the Apple store. And it says, and that the zombies would line up to pay for it themselves. They see us as zombies. And the iPhone is your Big Brother device, regardless of what happens with these flock cameras. Well, just to underscore how they're pushing us towards communism, towards Marxism, we have Hollywood Rewrite. This is done by Andy Serkis, the guy who played Gollum in Lord of the Rings, and a very talented actor. They've used many times they put motion detectors on him and sensors, and then they map his movements into using computers into fictional characters like gorillas or golems or whatever. Now he is doing his own movie that he's directing of Animal Farm. And guess what he's done? He's made the communists kind of comic relief, and the good guys, he puts a happy ending on it, and the villain is no longer the pigs. The villain is no longer the communists, which is what Orwell's story was about. Orwell's story was a metaphor for what had happened in the Soviet Union under Stalin. And of course, he had leaned toward the left. He'd seen his anti-fascist friends who were communists. He'd seen them rounded up and executed by Stalin. And that was a big part of Animal Farm. George Orwell did not write a children's book. When the final page of Animal Farm closes and the animals look through the farmhouse window, so they can no longer distinguish the pigs from the men, there is no rescue, there is no uprising, there is no redemption. The point is the horror. And the point is the nature of power and the nature of men. It's the same thing that Tolkien was talking about in The Lord of the Rings. That lesson is precisely what Andy Serkis has decided that modern audiences cannot be trusted to receive. His new animated adaptation of Animal Farm, set for theatrical release May the 1st, or less than a month away. Distributed by Angel Studios. These are the people who are doing a lot of Christian-style movies. I hesitate to call them Christian movies. But they're doing a lot of wholesome Christian-style movies, and this is a total betrayal, folks, because communism is as anti-Christian as you can get. It takes Orwell's bleak masterwork, and it gives it something that the original never had and never wanted, a happy ending. The animals overthrow Napoleon, and they plan a brighter future. Hope blooms over the barnyard. No, that's not what Orwell did. Orwell was totally black-pilled. Whether you're talking about 1984 or Animal Farm, he didn't have much hope in human nature or mankind. And we should never put hope in human nature or mankind. The only hope is in Christ. We should understand that. And that is a lesson that all of us should understand. That's not being black-pilled. That's being realistic to see people and to see this world and human nature as it is. Andy Serkis' new animated Animal Farm rewrites it into an animated adventure with a hopeful conclusion. I'm also reminded of Brazil, which was Terry Gilliam from Monty Python. That was his kind of comedic take on 1984. And of course, it does not have a happy ending either. And so the studios would not release it. I can't really put all the blame on Andy Serkis. If he really goes with a downbeat ending like Brazil, they will do everything they can to stop it. As a matter of fact, the only way that Terry Gilliam got Brazil released was to have a private screening for some film critics in LA and I think New York as well. And they just raved about it, which got him a little bit of a release, but he fought the studios and they were not going to release the film at all if he didn't do a happy ending. Then they went back and they filmed a happy ending, a Love Conquers All version. And if you get the DVD, you can see that. You can see both versions of them. And anyway, Orwell's novella was a deliberate allegory for the Soviet Union under Stalin, depicting how revolutionary idealism collapses into tyranny. It was a warning with no redemptive ending, and that was done by design. This report is from Discern Report. The new film, however, shifts the primary villain from the communist corruption to external capitalist greed, embodied by a new character, businesswoman Frida Pilkington, voiced by Glenn Close. So he's got a lot of big name talent in all this and a lot of money. Napoleon, Orwell's stand-in for Stalin, is reimagined as a goofy, buffoonish figure. His rise to power is played partly for laughs and for flatulence jokes. There we go. That was something. I guess George Orwell forgot to put in the flatulence jokes.
I'm personally of the opinion that there are certain stories that you just can't dumb down. And then if your kid's not in a position to understand it, you just don't have to have them read it or see it.
Yeah, you wait
1984 is a bleak story. It has to be that way for it to have any impact at all.
That's right.
And as such, your kid doesn't need to be worried about the communist specter at 10 years old. You can afford to shelter them from that bleak reality until they're a little bit older. Let your kids be kids. Stop being like, oh, I'm going to have my 8-year-old read 1984. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Let them enjoy life while they can.
And then one year,
time for that later on.
Then one year you drop everything on them. They could see Lord of the Flies, 1984, Animal Farm. That was what we had in high school. We got hit with all those things all at once.
There's enough beautiful stories. The Lord of the Rings is full of idealism and hope, and that's what children should have. They get fairy tales where you teach them that the good guy needs to fight. The good people have to stand up.
The good guys do win because God is in control. That's the bottom line. And that does come through in Lord of the Rings, I think. It's something that's very easy for the parents to explain that. Anyway, in Serkis's film, he has no ideology, he said, but it does have idealism, he said when he was speaking about this film. He said, we enthusiastically embrace capitalism while rebelling only against corruption. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what they want you to think. Hollywood takes Orwell's communist masterpiece and makes it anti-capitalist and woke instead, said one person, and as they put out the trailer for it, and it was absolutely right. Circuses, I guess we get bread in circuses. Bread in circuses films. It mistakes greed for the totality of Orwell's concern when the original was about inescapable corruption embedded in human nature itself. Yeah, Hollywood doesn't have a problem talking about greed, which is in and of itself kind of ironic, considering what motivates the people in Hollywood. But I guess they figure that is hitting so close to home with them that they're being honest with people. Anyway, a familiar Hollywood pattern of refashioning morally complex Western literature into ideologically safe, capitalist critical entertainment, quote unquote entertainment. So it was written in 1945 after Orwell witnessed firsthand the Soviet-aligned communist factions in Spain murder and disappear his comrades. Animal Farm was a surgical strike against a specific lie, the lie that a collectivist revolution led by the right people with the right slogans could produce lasting equality and justice. Yeah, we just haven't done communism right yet. That's always what you hear. Yeah, we just need the right people. If we haven't had the right people, we never will have the right people. It requires a human nature that doesn't exist except in our imagination. Orwell was not writing a story about how bad men corrupted a good system. He was writing about the nature of power itself. And he was really writing about human nature and why power cannot be trusted to a few individuals. That's what the founders understood in America. That's why our revolution was different. All the other revolutions have been of the type of Jacobin communist revolution, where they take absolute power, and of course it destroys them, and it destroys the country. So he said it doesn't have any ideology, but it does have idealism. Our characters enthusiastically embrace capitalism. They're just against corruption, he says. So that is meant as a defense, but it is actually a confession, says Discern Report. When you relocate the origin of evil from within the revolutionary movement, from within the hearts of the pigs themselves, and you plant it into an outside capitalist antagonist, you've not adapted Orwell, you have inverted him. The new film suggests that the collectivist world, the collectivism works well enough until capitalism gets its hands on it. Viewers reacting to the trailer on social media noticed this immediately, with one person summing it up. It's 2025, and Animal Farm is now a movie about communism working, yet being ruined by capitalism. That's exactly what they want you to think. To tell Orwell's story faithfully is to tell a story about the failure of the left's foundational political project. Hollywood is not prepared to make that film. So instead it makes a different film. It borrows Orwell's name, his animals, and his barnyard, and it quietly replaces his thesis with its own. Well, we've seen a lot of people rewrite a lot of things, haven't we? We saw John Cleese come after Christianity in the past, and yet he's now having second thoughts about this, just like Richard Dawkins, who says, well, culturally, I'm Christian. I really love Christmas carols and, the songs around Christmas time. I love the architecture. I love the framework for laws and our civilization that has. He just doesn't want the root of all that fruit, right? He likes the fruit of Christianity, but he doesn't like the root, the Lord Jesus Christ.
It's continually these older generation comedians that spent their entire career trying to tear down these systems, trying to tear down and poke fun at Christianity, suddenly realizing, wait a minute, why is this culture that I love collapsing? Where is it going? Who did this?
Yeah.
There's this meme that floats around, just a guy like throwing seeds everywhere, like, oh man, I love sowing so much. And then the whirlwind comes like, no, I hate reaping. I hate this. How could this happen? Like, yeah,
these guys have been sitting on the branch they've been sawing off for a very long time, right? That's kind of what it is with John Cleese and with Richard Dawkins. John Cleese is now blasting the BBC over whiteness claims. He's pushing back against the Islamicist tide in Britain. And this is the thing that is causing both him and Richard Dawkins to say, I wish we could have Christianity, because they're seeing what Islam looks like. Responding to a BBC claim that the UK education system, quote, wasn't built for black children, unquote, and was instead designed for, quote, whiteness, Cleese cut through the nonsense with his characteristic clarity and says it was built for British children because it was Britain. And he said, at that time, most British children were white. To claim that this is some kind of a racist conspiracy is insane. The BBC has a hidden agenda. Well, no, they don't. It's not hidden anymore, which is against the beliefs of the majority of the British people. Yeah, their agenda is out front for everybody to see, quite frankly. He continued on, he said, this sage is proposing that as his followers are incapable of controlling their emotions, their victims should be the ones who are blamed and punished. Much of Islamic teaching consists of the glorification of the male ego and the encouragement of its worst manifestations. So again, he is arguing with the people online, but it is, and he's responding to an imam who is there. But it is people like him, people like Richard Dawkins, who have done the best they could to destroy the foundations of Western civilization, which is Christianity. And so the question is, when we look at some of the things that we have metastasized into. There's an interesting question from Jeffrey Tucker at Brownstone. He says, what if the FDA were eliminated? Well, I'd love to see that happen because it's not constitutional. As a matter of fact, he says, the second Trump administration arrived in the wake of the brutal COVID experience with the hope of gutting the deep state. Now, that's the very first sentence. When I looked at that, I just shook my head. It's like, what is he talking about? First of all, it was done to us by COVID. It wasn't done to us by Trump. Are you serious? And Jeffrey Tucker keeps going back and forth over the line. First, he tells everybody, hey, look what they did to us and look at how unnecessary and harmful this was. And then, they lied to us about this, they lied to us about, but then he'll say, oh, but COVID did it to us and we can't blame Trump. Well, here's the reality.
Well, one thing we do know is that when Biden left office, he was granted this very bizarre pardon where he got a pardon that goes back to 2014 for crimes he was never accused of, never convicted. I mean, it's got to be. He's
talking about Fauci.
Anybody's ever been pardoned.
Yeah, and I think it should be challenged. And so we have, under the Biden administration, I sent criminal referrals for Anthony Fauci to Merrick Garland twice, and I sent them evidence that he had lied to Congress, which was a felony. They just ignored me. I've been working with Bobby Kennedy, and he's been very helpful on this. I have a good relationship with him. He's given us a lot of information, and we've looked at the communications. And in Anthony Fauci's communications, we now have evidence that he was telling people like Francis Collins, read this and destroy it. Well, you can't do that. The executive branch, when they communicate, they're required to keep their communications, and they're required to do it on government devices. So we have this evidence, and I've summarized it again in a criminal referral to Trump's attorney general, and I still haven't gotten action. But there's a couple reasons we should do it. One, he shouldn't get away with lying. He shouldn't get away with destroying records. But two, we should check the pardon. Is an auto pen pardon valid? And is a pardon a retrospective pardon back 10 years that doesn't mention a crime? Can you give people a pardon for everything they did in a 10-year period? I can't imagine, and I think the court might narrow that. But it doesn't happen unless the Trump Justice Department will do something. And I've been sending them referrals. I can't get them to do anything.
Can't understand.
I can't guarantee they'll win. They might lose, but they ought to go to court. Take it to court.
Can't understand why Pam Bondi and the Trump administration won't go after Fauci. Well, you might want to take a look at the fact that Trump is very pleased with what Fauci did. I gave him a medal on his last day. Commendation, as some people want to quibble about that. It's like, look, you give somebody a special commendation. I don't care if it's a medal or if it's a blue ribbon, whatever it is. He celebrated what he did, okay? And it's essentially functionally the same as giving him a medal. So as Jeffrey Tucker says, the second Trump administration arrived in the wake of the brutal COVID experience. The first Trump administration created that. Come on, Tucker. Jeffrey Tucker, with the hope of gutting the deep state. Well, guess what? The quote-unquote deep state, the administrative state, is all under the executive branch. Trump did the COVID pandemic. Trump ran the deep state. He ran the swamp, and he ran our country into the ground in his first term. So don't pretend that he just arrives and inherits some problem that was magically there because of Biden or because of Fauci. He embraced everything that Fauci did. He gave Fauci the podium. And I've always criticized him for that. He should criticize him for that as well. Jeffrey Tucker goes on. He says, reform efforts, however, have been met with frustration. What do you think? I mean, you still can't acknowledge who the source of all this stuff is. He goes on to say, Moderna, the company that was tasked with the development of mRNA shots for COVID, who tasked them, Jeffrey? The man who shall not be named, not Voldemort, but Donald Trump, right? They were tasked with the development of mRNA shots for COVID. They have been given the green light for further development of the technology for a flu shot, among other grave disappointments. You're disappointed, are you? This is why I have to laugh when I look at all these people who are now, I don't support Trump anymore. He's become something I completely don't recognize. It's like, why didn't you recognize what he was 10 years ago or even 6 years ago? You didn't want to recognize what he was doing in 2020? Seriously? So again, it also might be a clue, Jeffrey, that he began his administration in the second term not inheriting all these problems and wringing his hands saying, how do I get rid of all the damage that was done with the lockdown that I did, the lockdown that I bribed governors, Democrat and Republican, to do? How do I, what do I do? How do I unwind all that? How do we have some accountability? How do we bring back the rule of law and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? No, he didn't begin with that. Trump began his second term with his little presentation that he called Stargate. And that was his favorite go-to Zionist billionaire, Larry Ellison, and the two of them talking about how they were going to custom make mRNA genetic poison for each and every one of us, designed for us by artificial intelligence. Trump has not repented of anything that he's done. And why would he? Because nobody is going to accuse him of it. Nobody is going to explain what he did. So he's not turning at all away from what he did. And as a matter of fact, he's turning to a new threat. He's now adding to mRNA, genetic corruption technology. He's now adding artificial intelligence. That's what the second term is about. Jeffrey Tucker goes on to talk then about the FDA. He said the operations of the FDA have been pulled in two different directions, right? We're supposed to have us supposed to protect our efficacy and our safety, but the injury and death has been a scandal for the ages. On the other hand, pharmaceutical companies hoped for speedier approvals and less red tape. I really don't care what these cold-blooded murderers want. Nobody should care what they want. RFK Jr. is there to offer you a false hope. He said himself, his purpose of being there was to restore trust. You should not, under any circumstances, trust the FDA. And he goes on to talk about its origin. And the reason I'm covering this is not just to criticize Jeffrey Tucker, but to show the Orwellian doublethink that is here. He can zero in and understand the corrupt origins of the FDA, that it was never designed to look out for consumers. It was never designed to work for safety and efficacy. It was, he even points out, it wasn't regulatory capture. It was created for this very purpose. It's doing exactly what it was created for by the people who created it. The people who created it, it wasn't created out of a concern for the consumer. It's created out of the demands from the industry itself. We've seen this over and over again in terms of local restaurant regulation. The restaurant associations are usually the ones who are pushing the hardest for more regulations because the established businesses can handle it. And they want to saw off the lower rungs of the ladder of success for their competitors. And that's really what this is about. He said, Americans assume, thanks to the FDA and the Department of Agriculture, that anything for sale for people or animals has surely passed some kind of safety and health standards, which is far from true. That is the understatement of a lifetime. As a matter of fact, I remember friends of my family and a good friend of ours, and his wife was killed by a big pharma drug. And we went back and looked at the history of it. The FDA had approved it. Then a lot of people got killed from this drug. Then they removed approval. Then the drug companies protested. They put it back out on the market, and his wife was killed with it. And so vaccines and drugs were the first two consumer products in American history to be regulated by government agencies. The Biologics Control Act of 1902, been around a long time, regulated the production and sale of biological products. It required annual licensing of manufacturers, facility inspections, supervision by a scientist, and proper labeling, including expiration dates. This congressional action came directly in response to a wave of, wait for it, vaccine injuries and death in 1901. A diphtheria antitoxin in St. Louis killed 13 children, while a contaminated smallpox vaccine in Camden, New Jersey, killed 9 more. Think about that. 9 plus 13, we have 22 deaths of children. How many deaths of children have we had from this COVID shot, just in the United States alone? around the world, I'm sure it's been millions. We've had miscarriages. We've had babies that were aborted because of this. We've had so many children who died from the vaccine directly. We've had more than 23 children die that way. And then who knows how many kids, because they hide all this stuff and lie to us about it, who knows how many kids have been killed from the long-term effects of this, from myocarditis and other issues. But just remember what the origin of this vaccine business has been. It is one dirty criminal enterprise.
Have you ever used orphans to study an experimental vaccine?
Yes.
Have you ever used babies of mothers in prison to study an experimental vaccine?
Yes.
Have you ever used individuals under colonial rule to study an experimental vaccine?
Yes.
Did you do so in the Belgian Congo?
Yes.
Have you ever expressed that it's better to perform experiments on those less likely to be able to contribute to society?
I don't remember specifically, but it's possible. And again, I repeat that in the 1960s, that was more or less common practice.
Everybody was doing it,
since
not just me.
Changed my mind, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. We don't do stuff like that anymore, right? That's always the bottom line. There was a great book about the evil of the CIA. And, the author goes through and explains all the stuff that they were doing. And I say, yeah, but they don't do that anymore. Yeah, right. Yeah. And of course, the pharmaceutical companies don't do that kind of stuff anymore either. This guy is an elitist. He is a eugenicist. As Terry Coleman, a historian, points out, he said the 1902 Act was an initiative of the large biologics manufacturers. It is impossible to disentangle the desire for strict regulation to boost public confidence in biologics, he said, from the desire for such regulation to eliminate competitors. So first they used it to eliminate competitors, then they used the government to eliminate their liability for their poisons. 4 years later, the meatpacking industry was in big trouble from the popular book The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, 1906. The expose caused a collapse in the sale of processing and canning industry as the public reverted back to trusting only local food and on-site processing from farmers. The meatpacking industry took a cue from the vaccine industry and pushed for regulation. The result was a Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. It targeted adulterated or misbranded foods and drugs in interstate commerce. And so the evidence suggests, rather, that the meat packing became less safe as a result. It didn't make it more safe. It made it less safe. It gave them legal cover. And that's what the FDA is there for. He said, today people talk about industry capture of agencies, but this is probably not the right term. The agencies were formed out of the plea of industry. This is not true for food and drugs, but also for banking, for transportation, for industry structure, for communications technology. This is, as Gabriel Kolko has demonstrated in his study of the progressive era, this is the hallmark of the progressive error. They're going to make everything safe, and yet what they do is they make the world safe for the corporations who then use this to make their products more dangerous. What would regulate these industries if the FDA was not around, though? Well, we already see this in electronics. We have Underwriters Lab. They go through, they do testing. And we would have a lot of organizations. You'd have something like Consumer Reports that does some very good testing on cars, reliability and safety and other things like that. People would turn to that for information. And there would be an open debate about that. I'm sure that the manufacturers who are targeted by some negative reports about their cars or whatever, as they do now, they push back. The consumers, the marketplace, can make up their mind. The most dangerous thing in the world is the fact that the FDA, which doesn't test this stuff, gives it a seal of approval. And then it is safe. You see this over and over again with the kind of floxin antibiotics, the antibiotics like Cipro and others that are based on fluoride. They've identify the problem and they give it a black label, but they won't take it off the market. And then if your doctor and your pharmacist doesn't tell you about the black label, as far as you're concerned, hey, this is safe. The government is looking out for my best interests. Nothing of the sort. He says, if you look at the COVID shots alone, consider that no company operating within a market framework could ever have gotten away with such widespread distribution of such ineffective, unsafe, largely unnecessary products. But just understand, Trump paid them to do it. He used your tax money, tens of billions of dollars he gave to Moderna and to Pfizer and even to Johnson & Johnson to help them ramp up production of these untested, unsafe poisons, genetic code injections. He goes back, he says, what began as the meat packers had extended to every other food source. The New Deal imposed a central planning apparatus to keep prices high via output controls and even mandates to plow up crops to take them off the market. Wartime price controls and rationing redirected production energies away from whole foods toward industrial substitutes. The huge push of the 1970s for maximum output started the trend away from local and small farms toward land consolidation and overproduction of grains. And of course, the government was always there with a food pyramid showing how your bases that you want are these genetically modified products of wheat that we have produced. This is a period where the mass use of chemical herbicides and fertilizers came into common use. The public was blindsided because government agencies continually assured us that all was well. And people are going to forget the lessons of COVID in time as well, just as people were shocked by Upton Sinclair's The Jungle and responded to that. That lesson has certainly been forgotten by contemporary society, hasn't it? We have no problem with processed food. Well, we talked about Melania on Friday, and people are still talking about this impromptu press conference. What started that? What was she reacting to? A lot of people said, what was she trying to get out ahead of? And we might have an answer to that broke over the weekend. What was it? The allegations that were going to be coming out in a book? Apparently, yes. There was a book that was just released, and it was essentially about Prince Andrew. And yet in that book, it had some information that the publisher themselves shut this down. But of course, as will happen, the information got out anyway. So even though they struck it from the book, it is still there. And we got some screenshots of it. There's one guy talking about it. Melania Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Text was removed from the Prince Andrew biography. And the biography there, he's holding that up, and for some reason, it's mirror imaged. I don't know why he put that picture up and then put text over it. But anyway, the name of the book is entitled, and it's about Prince Andrew. Here's the excerpt that they took out of it. They said, in December 2019, the president and the prince, Donald Trump, interviewed on television, would deny knowing Prince Andrew in spite of extensive photography, then records showing their public meeting going back several years. And this is a pattern of behavior from Trump. He just, like Bill Clinton, when he gets caught with something, he just denies it completely. In a 2015 interview with Fox News host Sean Hannity, Trump would be asked what he thought of former President Bill Clinton. He said, "Oh, nice guy. He's got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein." When a Bloomberg reporter asked Mr. Trump what problems he thought Mr. Clinton would face, he said, "Oh, I don't know, but that island was really a cesspool. There's no question about it. Just ask Prince Andrew. He'll tell you about it. The island was an absolute cesspool." And this is after he denied over and over again that he knew who Prince Andrew was, that I never met him, and so forth, in spite of all the pictures with Prince Andrew. This is a pattern of behavior from both Donald and Melania. Forget those photographs out there. Now they've got an even better alibi. They can just claim that the photographs are AI generated. And there are AI generated photographs. I wouldn't be surprised if they're the ones who are doing the most of them, just to give themselves an alibi, because there's real photos out there as well. And he went on to say, one of Palm Beach's wealthiest residents, who knew both Epstein and Trump, related how the future president had tried to distance himself from Epstein by, quote, claiming he wasn't close to him. It's the furthest thing from the truth, he said. The witness recalled attending several functions in which both men were present, including one in 2002, when they were both sitting at the same table, talking to each other most of the time. He also described a party on a private yacht for which several Russian escorts had been booked. Trump and Epstein were there, attractive young girls surrounding them. They both seemed to be in their finest element and with the girls. So this is a pattern that we have seen over and over again. Decades of palling around as best friends, and yet he claims that he doesn't know him at all. And we've seen the same stuff from Bill Clinton as well. So as Melania said, she was not one of Epstein's victims. Well, maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was more than happy to be a part of it. Anyway, she added, I was not a participant. Well, the big blockbuster news that came out of this is not the fact that Trump lied. That's not newsworthy, actually, I guess, anymore. We cover that story every day and whatever he talks about, he's lying. And so the big bombshell out of that book was that the author said that Epstein had boasted to him that he knew Melania before Donald Trump. And I'm meaning in the biblical sense. It's kind of strange to think of anything biblical with Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, but that's what he was saying in that. So he was boasting about that. So anyway, the bottom line is, I think that perhaps, my guess would be that that's why she went proactive on that. And she went strong enough that she actually opposed Trump and Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice and all the lies that were coming from Kash Patel and Dan Bongino about all this stuff. There's a lot of distractions, and there's even more distractions that are coming. And of course, one of the people who is selling this the hardest, besides Benny Johnson is always getting people on to talk about the UF hoax, which I call it that. It's really what it is, the unidentified foreign hoax. Tim Burchett, here in Tennessee, congressman from Tennessee, says, well, I got names and dates and people and locations, and they're given to me by people that you can trust. These are people with government titles and government jobs and government uniforms, so they can't be lying, right? Well, even Tim Burchett is not that naive, although he thinks that you are. He says, you got to ask, why are they doing this now? And he says, do they want some money for some project or their organization? Well, that's a big part of it as well. But Tim Burchett, here he is talking about the next distraction, the big distraction that they've got lined up to get us away from Epstein and Trump's involvement in that.
This is about UFOs. I couldn't let you out of here without asking you about that. You've said you've seen UFO briefings that would, quote, set the earth on fire, end quote. And you also said publicly, you're not suicidal. That's a serious statement. What exactly are you being told that the American people aren't allowed to hear, sir? About
we go into what's called a skiff, and that's kind of James Bond room. It's lead lined. You can't take a cell phone. You got a Fitbit. I don't. But I've been in those rooms and they'll say, hey, somebody's still getting a signal. Somebody's got a cell phone, and somebody will check their, oh crap, that's my Fitbit. Sorry, it's my whatever. And they have to go out of the room. And we're briefed by the highest level of either our military intelligence, these alphabet agencies.
Does any of that matter? No.
Which again, you've got one group telling you within some of these things that they don't exist. One time this little punk with a freaking man bun, and then you got these military people telling us that something does exist. And
so you believe the military people because they got a uniform instead of a man bun.
Talked enough, but you got to realize too, it's all about the money. And is this a psyop or what? Are they putting this garbage out there so that people will say, gosh, we need to fund these agencies more, and so we can research it more? I'm not into all that. It's not about little green men. It's not about flying saucers, sir. It's about what are they spending tens of maybe billions of your tax dollars on? If it doesn't exist, then why are they studying it? And if it does exist, as I told President Trump the other day, you need disclosure. We need transparency. America can handle it. I'm sick of hearing this stuff. We can't handle it. and I'm a Christian, and they appealed to me on that level. Burchett, this stuff's kind of anti-Christian, and your beliefs. I said, no, it isn't.
It is.
This is one. God created the heavens and the earth.
What do they look like? What do they look like? Can you tell me? I mean, you've seen Independence Day. You've seen aliens. You've seen a few things. What do they look like? Give me that one.
Well, it's not Independence Day, I'll tell you that.
Okay. I got you. What can you tell me?
But they're gonna, if they would just look, if they would just release what I was briefed on just a couple of weeks ago. Again, we had somebody come in there, a colleague, a friend, if you will, that was basically there to disrupt.
Okay.
And they tried to ruffle this guy's feathers and ask him stuff. And sir, he named names, dates, people in the meetings, where these items, if you will, are located. And it's too much. It's too much, sir. It's too much is going on. But don't believe any of this stuff you see on the internet, this AI stuff. I wouldn't believe it unless
believe the people in uniforms.
Okay.
All right.
So, but Trump's the guy to do it. If anybody will do it,
yeah.
Anybody's a disruptor, it's Donald J. Trump, and he will disrupt with this.
Oh, I agree with that.
I had a conversation with folks at the White House today just about that, and we're going to be, hopefully some things will be coming.
Yeah, that's right. Donald Trump. If anybody can disrupt, it'll be Donald Trump, right? That's what his mission is. He's there to disrupt, to distract, to divert people's attention, and to destroy this country. 4D chess. That's what that really is about. The 4Ds are disruption, distraction, diversion, and destruction. That's what he's all about. So he says, I've had all these different people come in. Some of them push back against it. Some of them are telling you that's for real. And, we got some guy come in with a band bun. I mean, who's going to believe that guy? We're going to believe the guys who've got titles, who are paid excessive amounts of money in the federal government. And they got a uniform to boot. I mean, those are the guys I'm going to believe, right? They came in, they had names, dates, and locations. I don't need to verify any of this stuff. I mean, I've got this on good authority. And I guess one of the reasons why I'm talking about this, because this is not really about the money, folks. This is not even really about distractions from Jeffrey Epstein stuff. This is spiritual warfare. We need to understand, Pete Hegseth is out there saying, God trains my hands for battle and my fingers for warfare and all this. Yeah, that's for spiritual warfare. And that is the mind tricks that are played on you. And when Tim Burchett says, well, I've had people tell me that this isn't Christian. Well, God created the heaven. He goes back to Genesis, right? But what does he disregard from Genesis? He disregards what God created and the purpose that God created. And so when you go back and you look at the aliens, these aliens are from a science fiction mythology that totally rejects God. This is all about, Carl Sagan and his, if you look at all this, if we have billions and billions of years, it's inevitable that life is going to evolve. That is absolutely a lie. I mean, there's absolutely no reason why a drop of water that sits there for a billion years is going to turn into complex life forms that have DNA and can reproduce and have sexual reproduction, all the rest of this stuff. There is absolutely no way that would ever happen, no matter how many billions of years you had. And he uses the same logic. Well, and then we've got billions and billions of stars out there. And so it's inevitable that we're going to have other life that has evolved independent of us. This is an anti-God science fiction mythology. And you better understand that's how it's going to be used. It's been sold to us by scientists and Hollywood people who are anti-God, who are atheists. And understand that is the real issue. This is bigger than just a distraction from the crimes of the pedophile in chief. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
Losing free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
Well, we had peace talks supposedly over the weekend. It's not a surprise that nothing came of it when you look at the people that Trump picked to go there. I mean, one of them is Bibi Jr. That's really what Jared Kushner ought to be called, because Benjamin Netanyahu used to come to the Kushner house and stay when he would come to America. He'd actually sleep in Jared Kushner's bed. So this is little Bibi Jr. Don't be surprised when we don't get when peace talks go no further, because again, Israel does not want peace. Bibi does not want peace. The Likud party does not want peace. And Trump's Zionist masters want war. And he wants whatever they want, regardless of what happens to our economy, regardless of what happens to the global economy, regardless of how many people die, regardless of whether or not this turns into a global depression and a world war. He doesn't really care.
Are you willing to end this conflict with Iran charging tolls for passage through the strait?
Us charging tolls?
Iran.
What about us charging tolls?
Is that something you're considering?
I'd rather do that than let them have them, right? Why shouldn't we? We're the
got Tommy gun on his shoulder for those of you listening.
They are militarily defeated. The only thing they have is the psychology of, oh, we're going to drop a couple of mines in the water, all right? No, we have a concept where we'll charge tolls, okay? I thought you meant that.
Yeah, you can't charge the tolls. I'll charge the tolls. You can't close the strait. I'll close the strait. And that's really what's coming out of this. It's kind of like you can't fire me. I fire you. I quit, right? Yeah, you're fired. No, you can't fire me. I quit. That type of thing. Well, again, if he wanted peace, he wouldn't have sent Bibi Jr., Jared Kushner. And so he doesn't really care. But he is a gangster. You know, that is so apropos. Again, for those of you who are listening on podcasts, as he's talking in this AI version, he's sitting there with a Tommy gun slung on his shoulder, up on his shoulder, like a mob's boss. So he said, boats are sailing, said Trump. Boats are sailing up and they're heading out to our country. Big, beautiful tankers. And we're loading them up with oil and gas and everything else. And I see people saying, look, 4D chess. You know, we're winning. Trump's whole idea was to shut down the global supply of energy and make everybody buy it from us. Well, guess what that's going to do? Again, if that were the plan, it would be unbelievably stupid, just like anybody who's selling that is an unbelievably stupid idea. Trump doesn't understand the secondary and tertiary effects of his tariffs. This whole idea that we're going to become some kind of an island, well, that's fine if you want to do that, but you better make sure you got a path to get there. What he's done with the tariffs, what he's done with this war is to cut off our nose to spite our face. This is a global economy. Anybody that went through the 1973 oil crisis should understand that. That only affected oil coming into the United States and the Middle East. That was only 15% of our oil, but it sent a shock throughout the global economy. This is 20% of the world's oil, a bigger chunk, and of everybody's oil. He says, we've defeated them militarily. They've dropped a couple of water mines. They call them water mines in the boat. We've defeated all of their water boats, too. Hey, what is the matter with this guy? What other kind of boat is there besides a water boat? What other kind of mine is there, with this? They do have land mines, but anyway, the water boats. He says their Navy's got 158 ships. They have 28 water droppers. Mine droppers, they call them. Yeah, he calls them water droppers, but everybody else calls them mine droppers, I guess. All of them are sunk, he said. We've won, whether you listen to the fake news or not, we have won. Well, again, the question is, if this is the case, if we've sunk all their Navy, how did they drop the mines without a Navy? Because they said long before the Strait of Hormuz was mined that they had destroyed their Navy. He said, they don't have the ability to drop these mines anymore. We destroyed their Navy. Well, we keep hearing that. We keep hearing that we have destroyed their missile production, their drone production stuff, and yet the missiles and the drones keep coming. Keep coming to Israel. They keep coming to American bases throughout the area. They keep coming to allies of America throughout the area, throughout the region, attacking infrastructure. attacking production. And so he's clearly lying about all of this stuff. And again, if he's wiped out their Navy, how did they deploy the mines? Because they had not deployed mines until just recently. Many people were talking about that. They said they would much rather not deploy the mines, that is kind of a nuclear option, because once you mine the strait, that blocks it to all traffic. They would like to selectively let through friends and stop enemies. And they could do that with missiles and drones, but they could not do that with the mines. So he said their credibility is down to 13%. Well, that's 13% higher than Trump's credibility, frankly. He said the media credibility is down to 13%. We defeated their Navy, they defeated their Air Force. We defeated their anti-aircraft, their radar. We defeated their leaders. And yet, as they keep making these statements, they've lost their missiles and drone facilities, and then they hit this massive barrage right after that and say, we have complete air dominance. They can't touch us. Then we have 2 planes shot down, 2 helicopters shot down. Again, every time they make these extraordinary boasts, it immediately gets shot down, quite literally. Now all we do is we'll open up the strait, even though we don't use it. Well, then what are you waiting for? Since they have no Navy, since you've completely won, why is the strait still closed? I just don't understand. It's so childish that he thinks that we are that stupid. Trump took a moment to rip on an NBC reporter, tried to ask a question. He said, "You don't know anything. Who are you with, ABC?" Reporter said NBC, and Trump said, "Well, that's fake news." Again, he was criticizing Israel for continuing and ignoring the ceasefire just last week. They came in with a ceasefire, and I played that for you when he got very mad at Israel, mad enough that he cussed them out.
Israel says that Iran violated the peace agreement and the ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. When I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have 2 countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they...
Yeah. So again, he swears about it for emphasis here, but that's the bottom line. Is I'm angry. Yeah, Iran violated this. They had a single missile, didn't hit anything, but Israel just threw everything they had into Lebanon, and he's upset about that. And then after he goes hard on Israel for the cameras, he evidently gets a call from Jared, from Bibi Jr. or from Bibi himself, and he changes his tune. He said, "Oh, it was never part of the agreement that Israel would stop attacking Lebanon." Well, then what are you upset about? Then they didn't violate anything, right? No, he changed his tune. And as I pointed out, Iran, as well as the mediators, said that was the agreement, that there would be a ceasefire, that Israel would not continue to attack Lebanon. Trump is outraged that they continued to attack Lebanon, and then he changes his tune. And he said, that was never part of the agreement. Well, then why were you so upset about it? Again, you want to talk about fake news? You want to talk about credibility? He has none. The man is walking fake news. So Trump started the war with 5 goals. How far has he gotten with these? Asked the Washington Post. And so, again, the goals that were set by Trump and the members of his administration appeared to shift. Well, we're not really sure, are we? Because he refuses to show that to anybody. Yeah, he refuses to show the agreement as well. Right? There was, according to Pakistan and Iran, there was a 10-point agreement for the ceasefire. Trump doesn't want to release that. And anybody who releases that agreement, he calls them liars. I have a friend who is an American, but he was his American parents were living in Panama when he was born. And so he still has a foot in Panama. He goes back and forth. And of course, he speaks the language fluently. It turns out that when Trump was going back and forth with Panama, They came up with a new memorandum of understanding, and it was published in Spanish, and the White House published its own version in English. And the people down there who could speak both languages said, this is completely different version. There's one version for the American audience and for the English speakers to see, and another version that was down there that they set up for the Panamanians to see. And then they took down the American version of it completely. They are just inveterate liars. They lie about everything. They won't even show you the agreements that they make. They won't tell you exactly what their plans are. Although they did say what their plans were in terms of some off-the-cuff remarks in terms of this justification or that justification. That's the only kind of indication of what their plans were. So we can kind of read into that from what they say. Well, we got to get rid of the nukes, or we got to get rid of the leaders, or we got to do this or that. Okay, so you've mentioned 4 or 5 different things here, but they never put out a discussion saying these are the goals, this is what we want to achieve, and this is how we know the war ends. When they don't put up something like that, that tells you something. It tells you that they have no plans to end the war, and tells you that they're not trustworthy either. So again, the goals were secret. The agreements are secret. You're not allowed to see the agreements for the ceasefire. So number one, we knew that from things that they said, they wanted to obliterate Iran's missile industry. That hasn't happened. They're still firing. As they pointed out, Hegseth said, well, they can still shoot missiles. We know that. Their command and control is decimated. They can't really talk and coordinate. Again, like I said earlier, one of the first things you do in a war is you try to destroy the communications of the other side, but they don't need to communicate. They'd already worked out their plans of what they're going to do. They've got autonomous, independent cells. They don't need to have a centralized command structure. They see that as a bug, not as a feature. The Pentagon, on the other hand, is highly centralized, highly hierarchical. They think nobody can function unless you have this centralized hierarchical structure, which is what makes them vulnerable. That, along with the fact they're putting all of their information and all their eggs into the AI and online database, things which are easily hacked. So they said all their factories have been razed to the ground. They've been set back in historic fashion, said Hegseth. Yeah, we all see how these people are lying, just like they lied about what was happening in Minnesota. And again, even though as conservative institute, the American Enterprise Institute, looked at this and said, well, their number of missiles dropped by about 90% within the first couple of days after Trump's attack on Iran. Their retaliations were very high to begin with, and they dropped about 90%. But they've been keeping that up. And a lot of people who are American, former military, talked about this, said, well, that was part of the plan. The plan was to exhaust the supplies of anti-aircraft or anti-ballistic missiles that are very expensive, very complicated, and we have a limited supply of them, and they have to use 2 or 3 for each incoming missile. And so they did a barrage to basically use that up. And so now, to put it in Star Trek lingo, shields are down, right? If they ever had an effective shield, the shields are down. And now they bring out their more potent, newer missiles that maybe have a better accuracy, maybe a bigger payload. The other goal was to annihilate the Iranian Navy, which I'd say, what Navy? You talk about picking your goals so that you can easily achieve them here. There wasn't much of a Navy there to begin with. They claim that they've eradicated it so they can't lay mines, and yet we still see mines being laid. They're complaining about the mines being laid at the same time they say they don't have the ability to lay mines. Iranian naval forces have long played a critical role in the Strait of Hormuz, yet that's not the only tool, and it's not their best tool. Their best tool, again, is the missiles and drones. They don't need a navy. They don't need planes. They have the same equipment that they have always had there. Number 3, ensure Iran's terrorist proxies in the Middle East can no longer attack U.S. forces. And again, you can put the terrorist proxies in quotes there. That would be Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen. And again, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And we go back and we look at Menachem Begin, one of the first earliest presidents of Israel. He was with the Zionist movement. He was a terrorist himself. He bombed the massive hotel that was there in Jerusalem when he wanted the British to let go of it. Israel on Wednesday ramped up the bombing in Lebanon, ostensibly targeting Hezbollah, but killing scores of civilians, injuring hundreds of others. So then the question becomes, so then who is the terrorist? Are the terrorists the people who target civilians? That's been going on from Israel for a very long time in Gaza. It's what is happening now in Lebanon. And so, again, Netanyahu said that Lebanon was not included in the ceasefire. And again, this is after Trump yelled at them, cussed at them, and then, of course, he changes his tune. I'm sure that his boss got on the phone with him and told him to change his tune. So number 4, prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Well, if that and regime change were your goals, and that's the fifth one is regime change, those two goals have been pushed in the other direction by what Trump has done. As I said from the very beginning, if he wanted the people to rise up against the Ayatollah leadership, his best approach would have been to do nothing. Instead, what he did was he made himself the outside enemy by bombing the civilian population. And the same thing is true in terms of the aggression against Iran. The lesson that they and others have learned from this is that it does no good to join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel never did that. Israel secretly created a nuclear weapon, and everybody knows it. They won't admit it. They never signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement. And so Iran and everybody else looks at this and say, well, you know, the only way that I can protect myself from these attacks from the United States and Israel is to have a nuclear weapon. That is a deterrent. And so that's why he's actually making what they wanted to prevent more likely. And so again, when you look at everything that Trump has done, it is a failure. But the talks were doomed to fail in the first place, based on who he sent and based on the fact that we are captive to Israel. You know, you got the tail is wagging the dog, if you will, or the zog is wagging the dog. So they have taken over our government. Formally, the two sides were talking about the future, but in substance, they were arguing about the past and about the right to dictate terms of the present. That was the way RT characterized it. They said, you're not really negotiating when you come in like Vance did and deliver an ultimatum. He says, well, this is the best and final offer. That is not an invitation to peace. And when we look at it, it's kind of interesting because, you know, Trump wants the straight open, and Iran wants reparations. The toll would actually be a way of getting both of those things together, quite frankly, but that won't happen. As a matter of fact, I had somebody contact me and did a book or something, and they wanted to talk about what would the founders do? You know, WWJD, not what would Jesus do, but what would Jefferson do? Said, look, we know what the founders would do. We know what Jefferson did. When the Barbary pirates started shutting down shipping and demanding tribute and so forth, that's when he sent in the Marines to Tripoli. What they sing about in the Marines anthem from, you know, to the shores of Tripoli. That's a very different situation, though. When you look at it, we are the pirates. We are the ones who are. Sorry, I had to sneeze here. But we are the ones who are destroying ships in the water, blowing people out of the water and bragging about it, circling back around and executing the people who were shipwrecked, who are no longer a threat, if they ever were a threat, and they weren't ever a threat. We are the pirates. We are the ones who are seizing tankers. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that Trump is saying. He says, well, if you go through the strait, if you pay them the toll or whatever, we're going to steal your boat, right? We're pirates. We are the pirates this time. And we are not Barbary, but we are barbarians because we have started the war. To start the war was our choice. We were the aggressors in this. So we are both pirates and barbarians. So that does not apply, as a matter of fact. That was a very different situation. A lot of people have argued, well, you shouldn't be allowed to charge a toll for something that is not a canal that was built, but something that is a natural strait or obstruction or something like that. And yet there are plenty of instances of that. Turkey's got one. There's several different places that have a natural strait, and the countries demand that people pay a toll to go through it. It is absolutely not the same thing as the Barbary pirates were doing. So, as RT says, the U.S. has failed to turn its campaign against Iran into a broad international coalition. This is one of the political consequences for the U.S. It is weakening the U.S. As a matter of fact, if we go back and there was that video that I played of that the highest-ranking French officer that was ever in NATO, and he said, look, Trump wants NATO to come in, but what does that look like? That means that we have a unified command. That means that you've got to tell us what you want, which means that Trump's got to figure out what he wants to start with, right? So, go call Bibi Netanyahu and ask him what he wants, and then you can tell NATO what he wants, and then they can say, well, we want to be a part of that or not. But he said, first of all, he doesn't tell us that. Secondly, it has to be a unified command. It wouldn't be under him, constantly changing every couple of hours what his goals are. He said, you can't do that. You can't have one group of nations come in here and they do their own thing, shooting over here, and somebody else comes in, they start shooting somewhere else as well. That doesn't work. But he says the U.S. doesn't really want military help. They want political help. They want political coverage. They want other people to say, yeah, you did the right thing. That's really what all this fight about NATO is ultimately about. Now, some people have said that, as Israel has pointed out, Turkey is next, that perhaps this is why Trump is maneuvering to get out of NATO. Not for the reasons that you and I would say, because NATO was designed as a bulwark against the Soviet Union, which fell. Not because NATO doesn't work, not because NATO is just basically a beard for what the U.S. government wants. But he wants to get out of it because he doesn't want to have this conflict between NATO and what Israel wants. If Israel wants to go after Turkey, we'll go after Turkey. Whatever Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party wants, that's what Trump wants, because he has been bought. He is a Benedict Arnold, or as I've called him in the past, Benedict Donald. So markets are reacting to the collapse of the talks as a warning of potentially prolonged energy shock. Yeah, we can all see this is coming. Trump has always rested on the image of a leader who lowers costs for the ordinary American, not one who drags the country into an expensive foreign adventure. Yet, that is not really what he did. That's the image that he sold to people, and people bought that, in spite of what he did with the 2020 pandemic. The pandemic showed us that he was a globalist. He was doing exactly the same thing that everybody else was doing. As a matter of fact, he had the American taxpayer pay for the development of this genetic code injection bioweapon and spread it around the globe. But he did everything exactly the same, and so did Biden. Both of them did everything exactly the same as everybody else was doing. Same thing that Macron was doing at the same time. Okay, so then the next thing is this, and we told you we were going to do this 2 months ago, so now we're doing this, and I'm going to tell you, this is what I'm going to do 2 months from now. I said, that's not the way an emergency would roll out. These people don't believe it's a pandemic either. RT points out, of course, Israel has no interest in peace. That is the bottom line. They want greater Israel. They want everything from the Nile to the Euphrates. And they are more than willing to give us a greater depression in order to make that happen. They are more than willing to give us a bigger World War III. Whatever. That is their goal, and they will not be deterred from that. They have a goal. Trump doesn't have a goal except to get money and power. So Again, even if, says RT, even if part of the American establishment would like to stop, it cannot do so without costs in its relationship with Netanyahu's right-wing coalition. And of course, what happens if they don't like you? The Zionist billionaires here in America will pour millions of dollars in the coffers to defeat you, just as they're doing with Thomas Massie right now. The very fact of the 2-week ceasefire, Pakistan's intensive mediation, and the rush to diplomacy show that the U.S. has neither free hands nor a clear exit strategy. As Axios reported, further hardline statements from Trump and new American motives around Hormuz, yet every statement now reminds everyone that Washington has not achieved the essential goal, hasn't achieved any of their goals. It has not broken the will of its adversary. It has not reopened the strait on its own terms. And it has not, in spite of appearances, it will not accept these terms. The U.S., for all of its military power, for the first time in a very long time, looks like the side that is in a hurry. The Islamabad talks were the collapse of the American illusion that it still holds monopoly over the terms on which wars in the region will be brought to an end. So what is being brought to an end is, Trump has ended our civilization. Trump has ended the illusion of Pax Americana in the Gulf states. All that stuff is ended. Petrodollar, all of this stuff. Between Biden and with Trump, the two of them are a tag team match. The U.S. military says that it will now blockade Iranian ports after this ceasefire. Again, you can't, Trump was saying he was going to block the straits, and his administration pulled it back and said, well, we're going to block Iranian ports, not the strait so much. CENTCOM came back and stepped down from what Trump had threatened. Again, who's in control? And can you count on anything that Trump says? His plan to use the Navy to blockade the strait is unrealistic, says AP. He'll have to concede on some issues with Iran. This is coming from a foreign source who's analyzing this. The Iranian parliamentary speaker who led Iran's side in the talks addressed Trump in a new statement on his return to Iran. If you fight, we will fight. In other words, they're not looking for this to continue. It is Israel that doesn't want to stop this anywhere, whether it is Iran or whether it is Lebanon, and they want to have multiple fronts at the same time. Tucker Carlson pointed out, and I talked about this a little bit, but it's worth stressing the fact that these areas in southern Lebanon are predominantly Christian. The most Christian areas of the Middle East is what Israel is attacking. And I pointed this out last week. I said, when you read between the lines, and they're talking about the massive civilian casualties that Israel inflicted, I think it's last Thursday or Friday. It's hard to tell because of the difference in time zone between here and the Middle East. Nevertheless, they were talking about the Red Cross being there. And I said, well, that tells you right there that's a Christian area. The Muslims will not allow Red Cross vehicles to come in and help them. They'd rather die than to see the cross on a vehicle. Same thing is true of the Israelis. So the Muslims demand that the cross be replaced with a crescent. The Israelis demand that it be replaced with the Star of David. So if this is a Red Cross vehicle, that tells you right there there's a Christian area. Marjorie Taylor Greene accused Israel of murdering Christians, while investigative journalist Ben Swann noted that the region is home to the largest population of Christians in the Middle East. Some of the holiest sites in Christendom are in southern Lebanon. And again, personally, I think we should not get caught up in holy sites and holy land. It's nice to have a picture of what things, but you're not going to have that for something that has happened 2,000 years ago. And it's not worth killing people over, especially that doesn't make it holy, really. Killing many innocent people and children in Lebanon, just as they did in Gaza, including Christians, said Marjorie Taylor Greene. But most Americans are silent. When I introduced amendments last year to strip Israel of U.S. taxpayer money, only 5 other members of Congress voted with me. And now they're all being targeted by AIPAC. Israel began bombing as part of its Greater Israel Project, which seeks at the least to conquer Lebanon up to the Litani River, as Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said in March. Israel is blowing Christians and their holy sites to smithereens, killing many innocent people and children in Lebanon, just as they did in Gaza, including Christians. This is the pattern. Gazicide, also known as genocide. And we have to do this because even though they appeal to Genesis 12, and God's promise to Abraham, they can't trust God to fulfill his promises. They have to do it themselves, even if it means murder and theft. You can't trust God. Sometimes you just got to take it into your own hands, right? That's the Israeli approach to this, and the American Zionist approach to this as well. When they cheer these types of actions, what they're saying is that God cannot fulfill his promises. We can't wait any longer for him. We have to do it ourselves. The American war on terror has decimated the Christian communities across the Middle East. Every time we go into a country, the Christians are wiped out. You can have Christian communities in Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq that were there for millennia. Then we go in, and what happens to them? They are wiped out to a man. I've told the story before. A friend of mine who was in the Pentagon. He retired, and then, of course, he kept a foot in it and was able to get some outside contracts to supplement his large pension and everything. So he was working on a bid, and this is when Afghanistan was raging and so forth. And they were going to put together some kind of a website for news and things like that. So he contacted me, thought that I could do a website for him. I said, no, I'm not into websites, but I know somebody who is. So I put him in touch. And my friend was a Christian, and he just flat out refused. He said, because what was happening at the time was the U.S. military was telling soldiers, don't, hide your Bibles. Don't let anybody see your Bibles. And you can't talk to anybody about your Christian faith. And so my Christian friend told my high school friend, he said, I'm not going to do anything for a government that acts like that. If you're going to violate the First Amendment, people's free expression of religion, I'm not doing a thing for them. And so my other friend said, you don't love your country? And it's like, this ain't my country if they're doing this kind of stuff. My country follows the Constitution. So again, about 2 million Christians, most of them Maronites, live in Lebanon, many of them in East Beirut. And so, I think it's interesting that Israel has called this operation in Lebanon, where they are targeting civilians, and this time it's Christian civilians. They've called this Operation Eternal Darkness. You can't make this up. Satan has to tell us the truth sometimes, doesn't he? Operation Eternal Darkness. It's for real, folks. Apparently, getting Israel under control so the U.S. could save its economy, save the lives of its troops, and stop a global depression is not something that we're going to be able to do. We can't tell the Israelis how to behave, right? If they want to murder people for land, which is the raison d'etre for the Likud party in Israel, then we can't tell them no. They just get to do it. So as one person said here, let me see. Oh, that's Tucker Carlson who said this. He's right. It's time, he said, to set up a healthy conventional relationship where Israel can pay its own bills, can fund its own military, and can act within the constraints imposed on it by its own economy and its population. That's what normal countries do. Most countries live with neighbors that don't like them and with whom they have testy relationships. There's no country in the world that acts with total impunity because it knows a much larger country will backstop it no matter what it does. And that is the situation that we're in right now. That's why Trump defends this, whole civilization will die message to Iran. He says, yeah, I'm fine with it. That's what bothers me. So are his professing evangelical friends. What does it mean to call yourself evangelical Christian? It means that you are focused on telling people the good news about Christ. Is that what the evangelical Zionists are? Is that what their focus is? Or is their focus on supporting a foreign political government? I would say, please stop calling them evangelicals. It is disgusting. As a matter of fact, Trump, as he's talking about, they say, death to America, death to Israel. America is Satan. Israel is Satan. We will destroy America. He says, now, does anybody ever complain to you when they say that? So I'm entitled to say, because they say that, I'm entitled to say, I'm going to end their entire civilization. I can do it in a day. Well, the problem is that when Iran says this, they are not doing anything to make that happen. And they don't have the capability to do that. Trump does have the capability with nuclear weapons. That's why many people say, is he talking about using nuclear weapons? They do have the capability to do that. But let's understand, really, when we talk about anti-Semitism and the rest of this stuff, this is a rabbi. His name is Elhanan Beck. And I'd quoted him before. This is the clip where he talks about the fact that, there are a lot of Jews who live in Iran. And they're not being killed. They're not being put into prison camps.
I take the extreme example. Iran is the greatest enemy of Israel. In the middle of the war, Iran didn't concentrate the Jewish people in concentration camps now. They protect them like normal citizens. There are 35,000 Jewish people living in Iran just now. And they have a golden life there. Even in the middle of the war, they have no problem. The Iranians have no hatred against Jews. They have a problem with the occupation. And the Iranians say that again and again and again and again. In the media, we are not against Jews. We are against the occupation. But the mainstream media are under Zionist influence, and they want to brush everybody with anti-Semitism, and then they can say, oh, this is Nazis, this is anti-Semitic. Haven't got nothing to do with anti-Semitic. Why the media didn't bring out this point that Jewish people living in Iran now, under the missiles, they're living free. They have today their schools, their high schools, all the institutes. There's a Jewish hospital in Iran, funded completely by the government. Why you don't see that in the news? They just say the Iranian anti-Semites, they're Nazis. Why people are so blade? Why they don't think?
As a matter of fact, as I pointed out last week, the synagogue that was in Tehran was completely destroyed by Israel. So they're saying death to Israel. They're not saying death to Jews. There's a difference. Why can't people understand that? And you see this over and over again. Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox rabbis like him. And I've had others on talking about that. As a matter of fact, you see clips all the time of people who are Zionists in Israel attacking the ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel. Here's another example of it. You want to see some Zionist anti-Semitism? Well, here's a bunch of Jewish protesters protesting the Netanyahu government. And look what happens to them. They get run over by a car driven by a Zionist Jew. So that car is mowing down people who are protesting the Israeli government. We see this type of stuff happening, not cars running down people, but we've seen them beaten by people who are wearing uniforms and that type of thing. That is not uncommon. And so when we look at what the war crimes are, there's a picture of that same car. They're running people down from a different angle, multiple angles. So yeah, it is not a unified front. You need to understand that when you are supporting quote-unquote Israel, you need to say, well, what is Israel? Is it Netanyahu, the Likud party? Is it Jewish people? Because Jewish people, there's a lot of opposition to Netanyahu in Israel.
Mr. President, how would it not be a war crime to strike Iran's bridges and power plants?
Because they killed 45,000 people in the last month, more than that. I think it could be as much as 60.
How many have you killed?
They're animals, and we have to stop.
Yeah, they're not human.
We can't let them have a nuclear weapon. Very simple. They want a nuclear weapon. They've been trying for a long time. I stopped them with the Obama horrible Iran nuclear deal. I stopped them in a lot of different ways.
Maybe that wasn't the best idea. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Whether you're feeling like the blues or bluegrass, APS Radio has you covered. Check out a wide variety of channels on our app at apsradio.com.
All right, welcome back. And I want to thank people who have been supporting us. And it is a real, we're really in your debt. Thank you so much. And let me thank people who have given us checks in the last few weeks. We'll go over this. I'll do Zelle tomorrow and Cash App tomorrow. But people have sent us checks. Timothy W., Marty, I'm Marty. Thank you, Marty. Appreciate that. He did the matching funds last month at the end. Dale L., Jeff and Cindy C., David and Noel T. They are new, I think, Karen says here. Tom and Nancy, Abby and Sammy, and they are not new. They have been supporters for a very long time and big supporters. And I just want to remind the audience, as part of their letter that they sent to us, just wanted to have you keep in your prayers their family. They've been very sick, especially Nancy, and so please keep them in your prayers. But Peter G., Lloyd P., Philip and Kelly M., Doug B., Julianne B., and both of them are new as well. Lois L. and Joel B., also Charlie at APS. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Now I want to give you some news from our community as well. This is some of it is very important here. Like this is from Handy, who has eyes on the ground as an EMS professional. And he says it looks like, according to a post on LifeLog, this is about organ transplants. He said, it looks like they're still requiring the mRNA injections to be eligible for somebody to get an organ transplant. And he said, what makes this really stupid is the fact that once somebody gets an organ transplant, they're going to be on immune system suppression for the rest of their lives. So what does it really mean? I mean, when you look at the science fiction mythology that's been created around vaccines and immune systems that are there, it just doesn't make any sense. So you're going to tell somebody that they've got to train their immune system to fight a virus? And of course, we've seen even more ridiculous stuff. You know, we had Anthony Fauci out there saying, well, if you've actually had the virus, that doesn't give you immunity. You've got to have a synthesized version of the virus in order to properly train your immune system. It's like, what utter nonsense. That's like saying that somebody who has actually survived 20 dogfights needs to go back and learn how to do it in a flight simulator. It's ridiculous. And yet that's it. As he points out, this is never going to end. And we need to just call BS on this stuff, because it is not just a science fiction movie. It's a really stupid and bad science fiction movie.
Also, I want to point out, you can find Handy on Substack at iHandy. If you want to go give him a follow, you can do that there. You can subscribe. Check him out.
Yes, absolutely. And so, yeah, I wanted to thank Ryan for, I think what he sent was something about Melania, but I was not able to view it. I just wanted to mention to people that I've had situations with this. I felt really bad because it was somebody who sent me some music. I tried to download it to listen to it. I want to know what I thought. And I feel really bad. I didn't get back to him as I meant to write him something. And I'm just rushing so much when I go through this stuff. If I put it off or I get interrupted and I come back and I'm on something else. So I feel bad that I didn't get back to him. I just want to say, if you want to send me something, rather than sending me a link to a Google Drive or something like that, which doesn't work too well. If you want to send music, if you want to send videos, I'd suggest people try transfernow.net. That's something that we use sometimes to transfer large files to each other. It's more convenient than SneakerNet, even though we're in the same house. Rather than running around with a thumb drive, many times we'll just send it even to each other in the same house with transfernow.net. It's free, and so you can just send files, and it always has worked. So I would just suggest that in future to people. And I want to thank Ryan also for putting together a lot of our shows on a disk drive. And he's talking about how many years he can fit into a particular disk drive and thumb drive. And looked at it and I thought, that it says something about the essence of our lives that you can just distill it all into a couple of thumb drives. Things that we work so hard on. Really is kind of interesting. And I got this from American House Hippo. He said, I always enjoy when you reminisce about your honeymoon in London. I always ask myself if the two of you and myself crossed paths, if you saw a boy around 10 or 11 riding on the Piccadilly line. Probably did. We took that line quite a bit. As a matter of fact, just the other day, I was looking at our diary that we kept when we were on the honeymoon, and I saw the address of the place that we stayed and looked it up on Google Street Maps to see what it looks like today. 40 years has not been kind to it, It's 46 years, actually. It hasn't been too kind to us either. The neighborhood's a bit run down, just like we are.
40 years and a few million Indians and Muslims, Yeah,
it was, the place was kind of junked up, but still it was the same house that we rented, a little tiny corner up in it's like a mini flatlet, they called it. And it was a tiny room that was set there with a gable window that was up at the very top. Anyway, kind of interesting to see that. But American House Hippo grew up in London. I didn't know that. I thought he was from Canada. He is from Canada, but he went from London to Canada, then to the U.S. He said, my mom used to work at Harrods. They couldn't afford to shop there. Yeah, that is, we got quite a few pictures when we went into Harrods. It was like a museum, absolutely incredibly expensive stuff. Nobody could afford it at the time except for the Arabs. And then the Arab actually bought Harrods that was there. It was Princess Diana's boyfriend, Dodi, I think. It was like Dodi and Die.
Die they did.
Yeah. Anyway, but he says she couldn't afford it. She worked there, but she couldn't afford to shop there. And I can certainly understand that. Some of the most esoteric, probably the most esoteric store I've ever seen anywhere was Harrods. It was really crazy. And the prices were absolutely astronomical as well. He says, I'm old enough, also, when we talk about terrorism and the Trump regime, he says, old enough to remember the IRA of the good old days. I'm not saying they were nice guys, but at least they had the decency to tell the police the fact that they were going to blow up a certain target and allow time for it to be evacuated. And sometimes they got the wrong place, or sometimes something went wrong and they did harm people. And I remember that happening when we were in London. We came out of My Fair Lady, and there was a big bomb explosion just down the street. And it really was strange. Like, we're not in Victorian England anymore. But, you see the Iranians doing that same type of thing as well. When they retaliated against the United States, I think it was last summer. But after we attacked them, they felt that they had to show that they could retaliate. But they did warn people, say, well, we're going to shoot this particular base over here. So that is kind of the bonkers aspect of all this stuff. So again, when Trump did his first terrorist bombing. But I got something from Vince Agnelli. I hadn't heard from him for a while. And I thought it was an interesting article. He's talking about well, before I get to that, I got another article about that. This is from a listener who says, Dear David, you recently talked about events that took place back in 1953 overseas. Are you able to elaborate a little bit more about those events? Well, that's from Eric K. And I think that was probably in regards to the overthrow of the Iranian government that happened in 1953. Everybody likes to talk about what happened 47 years ago with the takeover of the American embassy in Iran. But that was after they had suffered under this king, the Shah of Iran, and his ruthless secret police that had been trained by the CIA and Mossad ever since 1953. So from 53 to 79, they suffered under this. We created the Ayatollah with that. That was a blowback against that. And that's why we keep talking about that. I talk about it. Gerald Celente talks about it. And that is the reality that really underscores it. So we don't realize just how counterproductive our policies have been over and over again. But as Vince Agnelli says, when you look at fluoride in the water, there was a news article that he sent to me from his local news organization. They're talking about why the fluoride in Prince George's counties is going to be reduced And what does this mean for your household? And this is a Fox News article, and they're talking about how vital it is. Fox News wants you to know how vital it is for your kids to drink fluoride in unknown quantities, because they're just going to dump it in the water. We don't know what the dosage is by the time you get it. And what is the correct dosage? Everybody's getting the same dosage, whether you're an adult male or a young child. You're getting the same dosage of this stuff. And so what they're saying is they're going to have to temporarily reduce the amount of fluoride from the 0.7 milligrams per liter, which is the level to produce increased risk of mental retardation. They're going to have to reduce that temporarily to 0.4 milligrams per liter. How unfortunate. And as part of this article, and what Vince was pointing out when he sent it to me, he said, they say in the article, a major supplier in Israel has had its operations affected by the conflict. So there you go. That's another way they're blessing us, is with fluoride in the water. It truly is insane. The many different ways that we're being blessed, isn't it? Well, John Cleese, as I said before, was pushing back against the Islamic encroachment. As part of that, he also blasted the world's silence over the Easter massacre of Nigerian Christians by Islamist terrorists. And again, this is something that, even though I look at some so-called quote-unquote Christian press sites, I didn't see this myself. 26 people, as they were worshiping, were killed and churches were burned in 3 separate Easter attacks in northeastern Nigeria. And as he points out, you have the Black Lives Matter people are rioting a couple of years ago over George Floyd or whatever, one person. But when you have 26 black people killed by Islamists, we're not going to pay any attention to that. That was his point.
Well, that's because the American Black Lives Matter movement is simply nothing but an attempt to extract more resources from the rest of America. It's not about caring about these people that were killed. It's about getting yourself a mansion. That's been shown over and over again, time and time again.
Yeah, and it is about promoting racism and conflict and division. Because, as I've said many times, if you're concerned about the way the police conduct themselves, we've had situations in the past where both whites and blacks come together to try to change that. There's actually more whites that are killed by excessive police force than there are blacks, but it's a higher percentage of blacks. So you can cut this either way, and you have demagogues on both the left and the right who will cut it to suit themselves here. But again, Black lives matter, but not Christian lives. That's the key, especially not black Christian lives. That was the point he was making. And so again, like as I said before, he has spoken out on multiple fronts in terms of pushing against this. In California, we have a new law they're continuing to push transgender mutilation and sterilization of minors in California. They're making this one of their core issues there in California. And as part of these hearings, a young woman who was subjected to so-called gender-affirming hormonal treatment at 12 and then a surgical removal of her breasts at age 13, she is now detransitioned and declared that gender identity is a farce. She said it is used to monetize, to traumatize kids, to destroy their bodies, as well as doing the same to mentally unwell adults. And of course, understand that Planned Parenthood is a key point of action in all of this, because Planned Parenthood wants to make sure that there are no parents. So mutilating and sterilizing kids is one way to do that. Speaking out against the bill meant to expand access to gender-affirming care. The doctors who removed my breast will never be held accountable, she said, nor will the other doctors who have hurt my friends. And she goes into detail about the horrible things that they did to her friends. She explained that when she entered adolescence, she struggled with her body changes as puberty hit. She said, strangers on the internet helped to convince me that I could be trans, and I firmly believed in it. I convinced my mom, who was told by doctors that I would die if she didn't accept me as her son and approve sex-rejecting interventions. This so-called privacy bill, she said, protects the monsters who wrecked our bodies, the healers who became butchers. It doesn't protect thousands of detransitioners who can't even get their own medical records. Doesn't protect the parents who are fighting custody battles across state lines, trying to protect their kids from what happened to me. Because in California, the state of California will stand in the gap if there's a parent in another state who does not want the child transitioned. One parent can take them to California, and California will keep the parent who is sane from intervening. She said the bill shields providers so they can keep chopping up bodies. It wraps the doctors, the clinics, the gender industry in a legal blanket and says, you are protected from accountability no matter who you harmed. She said, I live with the damage done to me at the hands of these providers every day. In other words, just like the vaccine industry. And of course, California is desperate to protect the vaccine industry as well. She said, I was 13. I was just a child when the surgeon removed my breast. I'm still trying to understand who knew what, when, and why no one has stopped it. Why the people who coerced my mom into consenting still have their medical licenses. If these treatments are as safe and as necessary as their defenders claim, they should be able to withstand scrutiny, shouldn't they? They should be able to withstand investigation. So why are you covering for them? She asked. And again, this is a particular thing that is California especially has put their imprimatur on this. Mark Houck, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, it's Houck. Is that Houck? One of the guys who was caught up in this FACE Act persecution, and it was persecution by the Biden administration, if you remember, he was at an abortion clinic, but he was way down the street. And you had a guy from the abortion clinic come up, get in his face, and start threatening his son. And actually, he pushed the guy away from his son when he started talking harshly to his son. And he was way outside the limit that was set by the FACE Act, and yet the Biden administration came after him, wanted to put him away for 11 years, raided his home. He's got 11 kids that are homeschooled. So endangered all these kids, coming in with guns drawn in a no-knock raid, like Gestapo, and wanted to put him in jail for 11 years. So he was, they did not prosecute him at the state and local level. It was the Biden federal government who did this. Now, he countersued the Merrick Garland Department of Justice. And what we see happening right now with the Trump administration is if you got people who have suffered lawfare under Biden, if they have a lawsuit, then the Trump Department of Justice just removes any opposition to it. They, by the way, have not done that with fluoride, right? Even after we won with fluoride, the Trump administration has continued to fight that. They've continued to fight for gun control legislation as well. But when it comes to some of these political issues here, in order to score political points, he's just moved away the opposition and let people get a multi-million-dollar settlement. And I'm happy that that happened for Mark Houck. I think he deserves that. The thing that concerns me is that even as we look at this injustice, what I said about Trump at the very beginning, I said there was a lot of things that were done to Trump that were unjust. It's one of the things that I think really helped him to get elected in his second term. He didn't have to debate any of the Republican competitors in the primaries or anything because he was the victim of this other stuff that made him above all of that. And I said, it's good that he does something about this. But I said, what I was worried about from the very beginning was that he was going to make this a personal vendetta. It was going to be a move to show how powerful he was, that he could punish his enemies, rather than change the laws or put some other restrictions to stop this kind of lawfare. And we've seen the same thing with the FACE Act. We've had Pete Hegseth's church, that's a church plant from Doug Wilson and his church in Moscow, Idaho. And remember, that was where you had Don Lemon and a bunch of other people interrupted them and disrupted the service. And at that point in time, I didn't realize that when they put in the FACE Act, they held out a carrot of compromise to the Christians and said, look, we're going to put this in, and it's about stopping, it's about abortion clinic access, right? But we'll put a little rider in there saying that they can't interrupt your church services as well. And people said, okay, we'll sign on to that. And I think that is absolutely a reprehensible compromise. And yet you have Pete Hegseth's church, the church plant from Doug Wilson, was demanding that the Trump administration now enforce the FACE Act against Don Lemon. Look, it's trespass. There's a lot of other charges that could be brought against them. But why keep this there? I got to say, if you don't want people interrupting your worship service, there is no song, there is no sermon that you can equate with a child's life. If you're going to accept that as a reasonable compromise and say, okay, we will stop anybody from engaging anyone going in to murder their child and trying to explain to them the reality of the situation. As long as you let us sing our songs and have our sermons in privacy and peace, we'll make that compromise. I think that's one of the most despicable things I have seen in terms of Christian compromise yet. Well, before I end, and I've gone over a little bit of time, I want to talk a little bit about Ben Sasse. And he's a senator who retired in 2023, became president of the University of Florida, and then found out that he was diagnosed with a very fast-moving, fatal cancer, told that he had a short period of time to live. And it's kind of interesting. I went back and looked at him because I really wasn't familiar with him that much in terms of what he stood for. But of course, as a professing Christian, he was all about stopping abortion. He had introduced the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act in 2019. He was fully on board with preserving marriage and criticized the Supreme Court redefining it. He's not absolutely perfect. In May of 2020, he delivered a graduation speech where he attacked China over the COVID pandemic. So there's that. You know, we all have our blind spots, don't we? But it's kind of interesting because as he is nearing the end of life, he's talking about his meaning of life. And we see pictures of him. He's taken a new cancer treatment, which is just horrific. I wish he was open to trying B17 or fenbendazole or anything that is not as destructive to your body as these modern cancer treatments, which I think they're like the kinds of treatments that they used to give people in terms of leeches and mercury and all these other things that they killed George Washington with. But that aside, he's been really good in terms of the Constitution. As a matter of fact, even as a senator, he said we need to get rid of the 17th Amendment and let senators be directly apportioned. So he had some great positions that I would really agree with him on, many of them. And I'm sure that I would have a lot that I would disagree with him on. He was one of the earliest critics of Trump, and he was spot on in terms of what he said about Trump, even when he was running in the primaries. He said that he would not support Trump if Trump became the party's nominee. And he was the first person to say anything like that. He questioned Trump's commitment to the Constitution. He's been proven right. In particular, accusing him of attacking the First Amendment, which he has done in spades now, especially in the second term. But Trump did get around to attacking all 10 of the amendments, the Bill of Rights, given enough time. And he said this back in 2016. He said, Trump thinks that he's running for king. That's right. He said if Trump won the party's nomination, he would vote neither for him nor for Hillary, but would probably look for some third party candidate, maybe a conservative option, a constitutionalist. He suggested that he might leave the Republican Party, saying if the Republican Party becomes a party of Trump, I'm out. And he did get out eventually. And so I won't go into any more of his political career because, quite frankly, at this point in his life, he doesn't really think it matters that much. And he certainly is right about that. He says to people who are still following Trump, he was censured by the Lincoln County Republican Party there in Nebraska. They were lamenting as they censured him that they could not recall him. And he said, well, politics isn't about the weird worship of one dude. You absolutely got that right. So with that said, I'm going to play for you what he had to say recently. And when you look at this, it truly is amazing because, I mean, he looks like he's got leprosy. or it looks like he's a zombie. Kind of reminded me of what it's done to his face and everything. Kind of reminded me of, immediately thought of that movie, American Werewolf in London, where you have the guy's pal is killed at the beginning, and he keeps coming back and talking to him, and his body is disintegrating as he's talking to him. But this is a very touching clip, I think. This is Ben Sasse talking about where he is at this point, just a few weeks from death, perhaps.
I was incredibly blessed to be quickly at peace. I kept hearing the Pauline phrase, to live is Christ, to die is gain. And death is terrible. We should never sugarcoat it. It is not how things are meant to be. But it is great that death can be called the final enemy. It's an enemy, but it's a final enemy, and there will then be no more tears. I believe in the resurrection, and I believe in a restoration of this world. And so I did not feel great fear about my death. I didn't want the pain I was going through. I didn't want to be a pansy ass, in the final moments.
You're doing okay right now with that.
I am doing
so far.
Oh, thank you. But I did immediately feel regrets about a lot of misprioritization. You jokingly referred earlier to my podcast, which takes its line from Monty Python, Not Dead Yet. We're all on the clock, and I wanted to have prioritized better. And whether I really only had 3 or 4 months left, or if I get 9 to 12 months left, I want to prioritize better from then. But in my tradition, in Christianity, the need for daily repentance is just a truth. I am broken. I leave undone those things which I ought to have done, and I do those things which I have not done. Morphine. And there is no health in us. And I get to repent every day of both my sins of omission and commission. And yet, at a slightly bigger level, if you're only going to get 3 or 4 months, you really want to get some of your affairs in order. And my boy was only 14, and I felt a heaviness. I knew that God wasn't surprised by the diagnosis. There is not a maverick molecule in the universe, but I didn't like the idea of my 14-year-old son not having a dad around at 16. Yeah. I didn't like the idea of my daughters, who are 22 and 24, not having their dad there to walk them down the aisle. And I felt a real heaviness about that. But I've continued to feel a peace about the fact that death is something that we should hate. We should call it a wicked thief. And yet it's pretty good that you pass through the veil of tears one time, and then there will be no more tears. There will be no more cancer.
Can I ask how you think your kids are processing the experience?
They have a great mom, and they are theologically rooted, and their hope is in Jesus. And they, all 3 are doing really well. My girls are 22 and 24, and I know that our conversations are the true and accurate conversations. My 14-year-old son is gritty enough and tough enough that I think even if he wasn't doing well, he could probably fake it.
Yeah.
So I don't fully know, so I covet prayers on that, but he seems to be doing well.
And again, those are words of wisdom. We're going to close at that point, and I'll just do this to kind of underscore what he had to say. He really has got it right, and he understands that he's somebody who's had a lot of accomplishments in his life, and I think he's got it in the proper perspective. Thank you for joining us today.
All I once held dear, built my life upon, all this world reveres and was to own. All I once thought gain, I have counted loss, spent and worthless now, compared to this. Knowing you, Jesus, knowing you, there joy, my righteousness.